What's really good, everybody? It's me again, Nathan Allebach, and welcome to the podcast where we get into people's stories and go down a bunch of rabbit holes about what's really good in the world. For today's episode, I got to speak with Brian Walker. Brian is a songwriter who goes by the name A Day Without Love. He's a community organizer and founder of the Philadelphia DIY Facebook group, which is like a networking hub for people to share insights on promotion and local shows, and it actually now consists of almost 8,000 members. Crazy. Anyway, in our talk, we dove into the story of how he initially got into songwriting and went through some really candid experiences of his growing up around racism, feeling isolated in the music scene, and we touched the surface on a lot of the national conversations happening right now that are widening the divide between political parties and just group identities as a whole. Brian is a super smart guy, and it was really refreshing to hear him be so open with his thoughts and experiences in all this. So, yeah, I hope you all enjoy our banter. Now let's get into what's really good. And we're live. Brian Walker, how you doing?
How's it going? Doing well.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man.
Anytime.
So, for those who don't know who you are or what you do, I think it'd be cool just to give a little bit of a backstory and start off day one, Brian Walker's life. Let's walk you through. What was it like growing up in the Philadelphia area, and how did you get into songwriting?
Oh, totally. I could definitely get into that. So, I was born in Philly, Germantown Hospital. Then I was raised in like the Mount Airy, West Oak Lane area. Some people call me an uptown boy, which I think is funny because it sounds like some sort of Journey song. Like, right. He was an uptown boy.
Well, it's Billy Joel. Billy Joel,
yeah,
uptown
Billy
girl.
Joel. There we go.
Uptown girl. I hate that song.
Yeah. But that's what they called us. And I started in the public school system, and then I went to Catholic school in Chestnut Hill. But how I got into music in general is I have an uncle who's a hip hop producer, and he started as a DJ like the late 70s, early 80s, and he got like a pretty big reputation like in Philly, and now he like produces down like south. Like
started so cool.
Had a phase in Atlanta. Even did an interview with Rockefeller when Kanye West was like, yeah. Like, so he's definitely been up and down. Like, he's had like mainstream people. So I always looked up to him like, hey, I don't know if I want to be a DJ, but I want to do something like you do. Mm-hmm. And then my grandfather's brothers, they all played guitar. I found out like after my grandfather died, he played guitar too.
Wow.
So I could definitely say it's in my blood.
Back.
Yeah, because like for so long I thought it wasn't in my blood, but guess again.
Yeah.
So they all played guitar, and then it wasn't until I turned 18 that I started playing guitar, but it was just like having those life influences of just like people in my life that were family, or just, if not family, like friends that played guitar, because I had a lot of friends that played guitar when I then moved to the suburbs and like went to high school at Springfield.
Yeah, yeah.
And like a lot of bands that like have been big have come out of my high school. Like Kississippi, Zoe went to my high school. Toy Soldiers, I don't know if you remember Toy Soldiers.
I don't think so.
But the lead guitarist of Toy Soldiers, Ron Gallo.
Cool.
His lead guitarist went to my high school. City Rain, that dude went to my high school.
Wow.
So yeah, and now there's me.
And now you.
yeah. So that was like and the different pockets of like the Philly music scene too.
Right.
We all went to high school together. We weren't like friends, but like, we knew each other. I had a few classes with Matt. So it was just like a lot of that influence of like wanting to get into music. But then the songwriting component, I think that came as a result of previously being a shy kid, because when I was like 10 or 11, I wrote a lot of poetry, and I did that because I couldn't get my feelings out and speak about them. Like, the only time you'd hear me speak is like killing it on the spelling bee.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Or I would sneeze a lot. But like, I was a very anxious, shy kid, and then I would like write poetry and things like that. And then I don't think it was until I was 19 that someone found my songwriting book and said like, yo, you should sing these out. And then it wasn't until 20 I like actually started trying. Like, I started hitting open mics. Then I was like at Penn State. Then I started the Songwriters Club, and then like I started playing at bars. And next thing you know, like I'm learning how to play in front of people.
Dude, so cool, man. Yeah. And for those who don't know, your project is called A Day Without Love.
A Day Without Love,
and how long has it been, that name? Like, what's the story behind
it's
the
funny,
name?
The concept of A Day Without Love is 12 years old, but the practical application of it is 5 years old. And what I mean by that is, like, getting back to poetry is, in 2007, I was writing a poetry anthology where I wanted to write a poem every day and then turn it to a book, because I had already written a book when I was 16. And my hard drive crashed, so I couldn't actually publish it. But one of the poems I wrote was called A Day Without Love. And the reason why I wrote that poem is because I was in my sophomore dorm at the time, and I heard this beating and a girl screaming. And it didn't sound like romantic. It was like violent.
Yeah.
So I opened my window, and there's this dude that's like punching a girl, and I was like, whoa, that's not cool. So like I just literally open my window, say stop it, run down the stairs, grab the dude off her, and then like I was like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, she deserves it, I was like, what do you mean by that? Like, no one deserves to get hit like that, like, period. And then he's like, she cheated on me with two of my frat bros. And then she's like, well, I did that because you cheated on me with two of my sorority sisters. And then like and then they just kept going back and forth at each other. And the next thing you know, the cops come, and the cops already knew what happened because clearly everyone heard it.
Right.
And he immediately went to jail. I saw her a few weeks later, and she was like, I'm transferring universities. Thank you for stopping this. And I mean, I don't know. He could still be in jail for all we know. Yeah. But that's the reason why I wrote A Day Without Love, because I thought to myself, what is it about a person that does that to another person?
Yeah.
And what is it about a person that will do that to themselves? So I wanted to write about just the concept of, like, being so low that you'll let anything happen to you, because, like, the day that you find that you don't find love is the day that you find chaos. That was one of the lines from the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to just, like, talk about my own pain and pain that I saw from people as a way of, like, bringing people up, because I think a lot of times in songwriting, people aren't willing to talk about pain, but they're only willing to talk about the wins. So I wrote that poem, but I didn't sing anything, like, until 2012, 2013. Like, I wrote songs, but I didn't, like, really focus in on that.
Yeah.
And that had a lot to do with just, like, not being good at guitar, not knowing what I wanted to do. I was young, you know?
Yeah.
And at 2012, 2013, I was homeless for a few days because of Hurricane Sandy. And I wasn't, like, fully homeless. I was more, like, couch surfing here and there at, like, friends' houses. And I couldn't stay in my apartment. It just wasn't in livable conditions. So that's when I wrote Island. And I met Jake Detweiler at an open mic. Actually, a lot of the connections I have started at the open mic.
That's where friendships start.
And I hit him up, and he was just like, yo, man, I just finished recording school. Do you want to record something? And I was like one of his first bands.
So wait, so this was at this time, just to backtrack, had you not been playing guitar? Like, this is 2012, you said?
In 2012, I had been playing guitar.
Okay, but you hadn't been singer-songwriter. Like, that wasn't a thing yet.
The only thing I had under my belt was playing house shows.
Okay.
Yeah, because I got, like, a lot of my house show belt under, like, playing more in Penn State than Philly.
Yeah.
So Philly, I was just playing open mics. I didn't really know too much about the house show scene there. Mm-hmm. But, like, 2008 to 2012, I was just playing open mics. And then 2010 to 2012, I was playing house shows at Penn State. And, like, the biggest things that I was getting under my belt was, like, learning how to open up for people. Yeah. Because we had a lot of touring acts come through Penn State. And what was great about that is Penn State's, you know, is between Pittsburgh, New York, and Philly. Mm-hmm. So if a band needed a stop-by spot between those cities.
Right, it's like a filler date.
Yeah, so, we had people ranging from Koji, Into It Over It, Transit, Man Overboard, Such Gold, like, all those bands.
All these, like, tri-state area heroes.
Yeah, like, a lot of tri-state area heroes. And the local newspaper did a story on us, and we did, like, 55 or 65 shows in a year. But, like, I was, like, calling myself A Day Without Love, in and out, like, more like Brian Walker, but, like, I didn't really stick to the name. I, like, released one EP, and it was terrible.
Dude, everything we do in the beginning is terrible.
Yeah. It was like recorded in a rehearsal room at Penn State's, like, so that was, like, my first recordings, and my friend Sam recorded that for me, and that was, like, for one of his school projects. And then I also did a single that never got released with my friend Andrew, who later became, like, my session, sometimes live drummer. But that's kind of like how it started. But like I always consider 2012, 2013 the real start.
Right.
Because it was like my first real recording, the first time I started doing real shows, the whole nine.
Yes. So like what got you, like around that time or a little earlier than that, like what got you into the style of songwriting you do? Because what do you would you classify it as emo indie rock? Like what's...
I would definitely say emo indie rock's like acceptable. I like usually tell people alternative rock with emo and folk influences.
Yeah.
But like I definitely think my influences, if that's what you're asking, is like they stem from a number of life experiences. So whenever I have like folkier sounding songs like Heart from Solace, like that comes from my state college background, because all my friends that were playing music, they were people that were like from the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, like Erie, you know.
Yeah.
And all they knew was folk. So I like learned those F, G, A minor, C songs like real fast.
Yeah, yeah.
But then like the punkier side of me, that came from like Philly friends that I had that like were into Circus Survive. And like I remember listening to Drew Turner for the first time and going like, I want to make crazy sounds like that. So like that's where that came from. And then like the blues and soul, that comes from like my family, because my grandfather was always into Bill Withers and Jimi Hendrix. So I wanted to just like impress my grandpa and just be like, I learned how to play this.
Yeah.
So that's where like those three, I would say, main influences come from. And then there's a few bands that like I just was into and I didn't care who influenced me there. So
that's so interesting, man, because you really do have a unique sort of conglomeration of styles that influence you as a songwriter and as a person. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but I know like you've been pretty candid like on Facebook and in your Philly DIY group about just how like your experience as a black songwriter in the Philly area, and how the niche musically that you've sort of fallen into is this like indie rock, folk, emo, blues, whatever you want to call it, this sort of genre where a lot of the people that you do like subsequently play with then who are into that style are like your suburban or rural white kids from, you know, middle of nowhere areas. So like, do you want to get into that at all? Like sort of what your experience has been, like kind of getting, like you said, like you have a lot of life experiences that got you into that niche of styles. True. But now that you're there, like you are pretty rare. Like you're a rare case in the Philly area. Like, do you agree?
I would definitely agree.
Like there's not many people there's not many, for one, there's not that many black indie folk emo songwriters in the Philly area at all.
One of us just got like stop being as active as they used to be. So,
yeah. So you want to get into like your experience in that, right?
yeah. There's not many of us, and I can count on my hands and toes when I think about it. But
because we're sort of all friends. Like the Philly scenes, it's not like a New York or an LA or a Nashville where there's like it's huge and everybody's competing and like a lot of different like groups of, you know, acquaintances and all that. Like the Philly scene's pretty intimate insofar as there's certain open mics and there's certain venues that circulate a lot of the same people, so we know a lot of the same people. You know,
like by at least 1 degree of separation.
Yeah. So
it's never 7.
Exactly. 1 degree of separation at most. Like, yeah. So you want to get into that, like your experience, just like sort of almost being like an outlier, like stylistically.
So I could definitely say when I started A Day Without Love, like in proper sense, like I would say the first 3 years was a lot of networking, but at the same time, that feeling of being an outcast was something I was very silent about. And I don't think it was until I released Solace that someone interviewed me and asked me, you know, that song, I Hope It Ends One Day, how do you feel about racism? And then the next question was, why don't you talk about this more in public channels? And I told him straight up, I was scared that people thought that they wouldn't believe me or they didn't like feel what I felt.
Wow.
Because like, and that was like the real case. Like I was scared. I was scared that like if I talk about that one time that I played a show and like a cop came up to me and was like, "What's in your bag?" You know, or that one time that I played a gig and like another cop said like, "Are you selling drugs to these kids?" Like there's just many like a lot of microaggressions that happen. Like and if it wasn't cops, like sometimes I would play gigs and like I'd be loading in and hearing people saying like, "Man, A Day Without Love must be really great. Like, I can't wait to see them." And I'm right there. And then I would say I'm A Day Without Love, and they're like, "You can't be a day without love."
Wow.
You know, like you're a black person. Like those are things that have happened to me. Right. And like, you know, I can't quote unquote screenshot it because it's real life experience. You know, and that's like the sort of things I was scared about. Experience like sharing in the DIY scene because it's a mostly like Caucasian area, and then 2, like it was hard to share because even my outside music experiences, I didn't really get to talk or speak about that. And then one of my friends who's done design work for me, who also is a black person, he's like, you know, man, you're talking about a lot of real things, but you don't really talk about, like, your racial experiences. And, like, him and I have been through a lot. Like, we've gotten pulled over by cops. We've ran away from cops. Like, we've known each other since we were, like, 15, the whole nine. And he's like, I think you should do that. And I'm not trying to tell you what you should sing about or what you shouldn't sing about. So then I, like, started to reflect on it. I was like, you know, I definitely know I'm a well-liked person. People do like me, but there's still that, like, 10 to 20 to 30% of people that don't like me. And some of them have different reasons that don't have to do with my race. But some of these people, I definitely know for a fact it has to do with my race.
Yeah.
And if A Day Without Love's about rising against adversity, why am I not talking about this? So that's kind of like what motivated me to talk about this.
This is just in the past couple of years. Because what year did Solace come out? Just to give some context for people listening.
Solace came out in 2016.
Okay, we're in 2018. So
Yeah.
Just for our future generations listening to this recording.
Yeah.
Cool. So, like, what? So prior to that sort of, whatever you want to call it, revelation, where you sort of kind of shift the mindset, what... Like, when you were you're talking about, like, poetry and how you used that to process what was going on in your life, and that eventually led to this outlet of songwriting.
True.
What were you writing about? Like, specifically, was it mostly internal struggle? Like, if you weren't writing about race and you weren't writing about sort of your experience as the person you are, was it relational? Like, was it?
So I should probably also rephrase this. I was writing about race. I just wasn't putting it out.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, I went to Lehigh, for example, and that was before I transitioned to Penn State. And there was an incident where someone skinned a deer head, put it in a brown bag, and then wrote the words, like, N-words deserve to die at Lehigh, and then threw it against the only, like, multicultural house on campus. What? And I wrote a poem about that called Because I'm Brown, Not White, because the newspaper was called Brown and White. And that I never put out, you know?
Wow.
And I just know, like, my roommate at the time read it, and then, like, you know, reported it to the dean, and then I had to speak to the dean, like, are you safe, da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But that was, like, the sort of things that, like, I was scared of, like, just keeping it real because, like, that happened, you know what I mean? Or after I left, some peers of mine had rocks thrown at them when Obama got elected. You know, those are, like, and that's, like, reductive as crap. Like, that's some 1950s stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was, like, a part, like, so to answer your question is what I was writing about. Like, I was writing about race, but I was also writing about, like, not being loved, not knowing how to connect with people. I would write about nature, which is weird because I have so many allergies.
Same, like every grass, like grasses, flowers, are just like it all. It's just...
But, like, specifically, I would write about, like, the sky, you know? And then compare that to other things. But it was always, like, relatively the same sort of things, but, like, in a more immature way, or, like, not understanding why certain things worked, things like that.
So so a lot of it really did come from, like, almost like a fear of being rejected by peers.
True.
Like, you really think that's, like, where a lot of that stemmed from?
100%.
That's so awful and interesting, just because it's like this is who you are. This is your experience as a person, and when you're a songwriter, I mean, just like any other, I don't want to say like any other artist, but sort of as the idea of an artist as a whole is someone who expresses, you know, outwardly, you know, like what is going on internally. And like that's obviously like did you feel like a lot of that was then suppressed in negative ways? Like, do you feel like you're at a point now where you've begun to like openly talk about this like more, and like do you feel more comfortable with like the topic now?
Especially when you said like was it suppressed? Like, keep in mind I also had another life change. Like, during that time that I wasn't speaking about things, I was drinking, and a lot of those fears came out through the bottle, and I would just drink, and I was in a swimming pool of liquor, and I was diving in. Not to quote Kendrick, but like that's literally what I was doing, you know.
It's like putting a magnifying glass on each one of these issues.
And then, like, not to glorify them, but like I was pulling Bukowski's where I would get drunk, go to a party, everyone thought I had a good time, and then I'd write a poem while drunk.
Wow.
You know, and then I wake up the next day like, yo, I'm dope. But I would never tell anyone because I was scared, and like how destructive and like not good is that, you know?
Yeah, that totally fits in, I think, with so many people's like misconstrued perceptions of how people, I think, process life, because it doesn't really matter what stage you're in. You know, I've talked to people in high school about this, like currently, like looking back, you know, kids in high school now that are like 17, 18, talk to people in like college and married, etc., it doesn't really seem to matter what phase of life you're in. There's always this weird disconnect where people have this tendency to only see the surface. Like when you're with someone face to face, or you see them on or you see what they're posting on Facebook, or you're in a group together, there's this really, really odd tendency to only see the smile on someone. You know what I mean? It's really, really bizarre. And like I know there's a social aspect to that where, like, you know, we want to be comfortable. We want to make other people feel comfortable. Like, hey, hello, how are you doing? I'm great. You know, how are the kids? Like, how's the family? How's the job? We're great. All right, see you next week. Like, there's this sort of weird social normalization that we all want to keep intact. But then there's also this really odd refusal, I think, to acknowledge what we know on some degree is going on in each individual's lives. You know, like
you're
just,
so right.
Just thinking about, like, you were going through your life for so long with all this inner turmoil, but to anyone on the outside, they would look at you. Yeah, Brian's dope, man. Like he's always having a good time. Like he can pound some brewskis, and you know he gets out there like just funny guy. And meanwhile, like you're going home afterward writing a poem. Like it really is so odd, like how suppressed it is.
And it's funny you say that because I remember my first friend that called me out on like being a warm person. Mm-hmm. And like we still talk to a ton of time, not as much as before, but like we were college friends, and I remember I was like, yo, why did you want to be my friend? Because how we became friends is we had like 4 classes together, but those 4 classes had like a whole lot of people in them, but she like gravitated towards me, and like we started talking, and then like when I asked her, she's like, you're such a warm person. And I remember the first time she said that, I like literally said to myself, you have no idea how cold I am on the inside. And I didn't mean to do that in a funny way. It was just like, it's exactly what you just said. And then like I started to become self-aware of how people perceive me versus how I felt. So
that's so important too. Like whereas I think most people, it's really odd when you get in these conversations with people, because I think it can easily come off, I don't know, like motivational, preachy. This is my life story, like almost like Tony Robbins. Like, you know, I've become self-aware and like now I can do this. But I really do think that becoming self-aware to these issues is the sort of starting point that so many people don't want to get to, or they don't have the resources. They're unable to get to that point because they don't want to. You go ahead now.
Everyone has to go through like a different measure to like reach that self-awareness. Yeah. Because like everyone has a different internal struggle. So like, for example, I wrote Diary and Solace as a way of getting self-aware about myself, and also as a reflection of self-awareness that I didn't have, or like it was in my subconscious, but it wasn't really said, you know?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is like, I've definitely had problems with alcohol, and like I've stopped drinking. I mean, it's been like 3 years and almost a half. Well, yeah, it's June now, so it's been 3.5 years. But I could definitely say, and I mean, Jake could definitely attest to this, seeing me record when I was drinking versus seeing me record when I wasn't drinking is like 2 different processes and 2 different versions of me. And a lot of that had to do with like taking those steps to get self-aware. And that was what I needed to do. And now my next step is like eating healthier and being healthier. Yeah. So I think getting self-aware is sometimes more of an evolutionary process for people than it is like take the Gary V option and just being
just speak it into existence overnight.
Drop these like statistics that like are real but are just like, whoa, you don't have to be that dark about it.
Yeah, it kind of subtracts like the actual human story, which takes years for some people. Like for you to have gotten to where you are right now, were there certain events that sort of led up to like your recovery? Were there friends who sort of like dove in and like offered love and companionship, or was it more of like a introspective self-realization moment where you woke up one day and were like, okay, I got to make some changes? Like,
it was a mixture of both.
Yeah, like what were some of those moments along the way?
Like for example, the first time I started thinking about like not drinking anymore is when I started grad school, and I woke up behind the Rangers Stadium. No, the Islanders Stadium. I was like, how'd I end up here?
Oh, no.
You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that.
Yeah. Like this, I can't keep doing this.
like stuff like that. I was like, this is not Penn State.
Right.
But then, like, there are also, like, heart-to-heart conversations I've had with friends where they're just like, hey, I don't know if it's drinking, because, like, they didn't want to admit that I had a problem with drinking, but they did want to talk about, like, hey, I think you could be a better person. Yeah. So, like, that's the sort of things that, like, I had to, like, face forward. So sometimes it was, like, internal things that I did with myself, or, like, I remember a time in New York where everyone ended the night at 10, and I was like, no, I'm going to keep going. And next thing you know, I'm talking to a couple that like does farming for a living, and they're in New York City while eating mashed potatoes at like 3:30 in the morning. Who does that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the sort of weird things that I did. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I mean, kind of going through all this, I mean, you have a very active presence on social media. So like I follow it like I try not to go on Facebook too much anymore, but when I do, like I see your stuff pretty frequently, and you're a very motivational guy. You know, you're always kind of putting out there, you know, like let's get after it. You know, it's a new day. Like a lot of I feel like just from talking to you right now, a lot of what you put out there, it almost seems like it's stuff that you needed to hear at a point in your life.
That's 100% correct.
Because you like just going through these motions, like you are very candid about your insecurities and your shortcomings and these parts of yourself that you're not comfortable with, etc. And on the same token, you're very motivational and you're very like get after your dreams, like be the person, be your best self, etc. So like, do you kind of want to get into that paradox that you're kind of within, where like it's almost like the best of both, where you are super, super vulnerable to your whatever inner turmoil, and at the same time you're outwardly trying to like inspire people to be their best self.
So like, I think that's also a very new thing I'm realizing about myself is like whether it was A Day Without Love or just who I am, it was more like I was always trying to think about the inner turmoil and never acknowledging the wins that I do have. And I started to realize like not too long ago is like, you can't acknowledge success without acknowledging failure, and you can't acknowledge failure without acknowledging success. And there's like a balance between that.
Yeah.
And if you were to ask me like, yo, what are 5 things you're trying to do with yourself right now? It'd be 1, find some grants for like my tour documentary that I want to do in the future. Get a car so I could tour more than I've already been touring, because I've been touring out of a train and a bus for the most part.
Yeah, it's crazy. So crazy.
Yeah, and like I'm not like on the verge of burning out or anything like that, but like it's definitely something where it's like, you know, I could hit a lot more towns more often if
be a little bit more comfortable.
A lot more comfortable, because like it's a little scary how good I am at sleeping on buses. You know what I mean? The other thing would be like get more aggressive about paying off my loan debt, my credit debt. And then 4 would be lose my weight loss goals, and also write an album about it, because that's what I want to do. Because body positivity is real, especially from like a male perspective, which I know is not really talked about. And then 5 is like get some better and healthier relationships and maintain the good ones that I have. Like those are the big 5 things that I would say I want out of myself. You know,
yeah, geez, how important do you think that is for someone to have? Because I think that like for me personally, like I mean, I grew up in a pretty like firm state of what we would call privilege, where you know I had a family, like my dad was an entrepreneur, and like so he was starting a business right around the time I was born. And so growing up, you know, like as I was getting older, like I always saw him working long hours and all this stuff, and he sort of and then there was also my mom's dad, who was also like into like a similar like business type of mindset. So like growing up, I had that. You know, if it wasn't told directly, it was told subtly to me. You know, you'd have goals, like, you know, figure this out, you know, get involved. And it was very, I was pushed naturally, I think, in an early stage of my life to you know, to know how to further, like, my, whatever you want to call it, my story, my ego, you know, get to the next thing. And I think that is something, whether you want to call it that or direction, like, just direction as a whole, I feel like it's something that a lot of kids, especially nowadays, lack, and it makes me sound like an old person. Like kids nowadays, they lack direction. But we feel. Do you feel it?
Yeah,
I feel that. Like I feel like, especially in the media now, like there's so many events and like that are in the news and figures that become popular now. Who it's clear that the reason they become popular is because young people feel like they lack direction, and
that person also lacks direction.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, do you want to? I don't know, like touch up on, I guess, the importance of having, like you named 5. Like do you want to get into each one of them, or do you want to kind of like go through like what sort of set the building blocks up for you to have that mindset, you know?
I could definitely talk about that. So like I was raised by my grandparents, not my parents. My biological parents, like there's 2 things going on. One, my mother has cerebral palsy, and so she wasn't like really capable of having me. And then my father was just very neglectful, and actually may or may not have essentially taken advantage of my mother. So I'm the product of something that wasn't consensual, to be completely honest with you. I'm trying to say that in the most PC way possible.
Yeah.
So that was that like disrupted my whole internal being of knowing like where do I go from here where I could establish a foundation that I'm comfortable with, because I didn't exactly grow up in like a nuclear family. So that's like what's motivated me to have these goals and why these goals are important, because like from my core, like being told at 11, you shouldn't be here. I wish you were dead. I don't really want you to be alive. You're a mistake. Like that I did not want to acknowledge, and that did drive me into a depression. Freud would say it's the root of all my depression. I disagree. But I definitely think that was like one of the root things. But then there were many other things in my life telling me that I couldn't do something. So I guess you could say it's my ego that's caused me to do that. But then also it was like admiring my grandfather so much because he's a Native American, like literally on the birth certificate it says Native American.
Wow.
Actually, it says Indian, but gotta love that. That's what that's what they called us. But he grew up on a farm in North Carolina, and he graduated from Morehouse University at 19 after starting at 16. So he graduated college in 3 years. Then he moved to Philadelphia because the rest of the family moved to Philadelphia. Then he became a mailman. Then after the mailman, he became a fire inspector. Then after fire inspector, he became the chief of L&I for like 45, 35 years.
Gee, that's a story.
And I got to like watch his investments like go from like investing like a nickel a week to, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars. So like just seeing how he went from like literally a tin roof to like a suburban home in Montgomery County like inspired me. And I kind of look at it like, that was his way of living, and I'm not going to live the same way he lived, obviously, because I didn't grow up in a tin roof.
Right.
But I want to be able to be better to the way that I was raised. So that's where a lot of that motivation comes from, and like why I think that's important, because he did guide me. Like I learned how to read at 4.
Wow.
You know, I was definitely like always advanced in school, but that was as a result of my upbringing. You know what I mean? And the reason why I was able to keep up is because I obviously was like blessed with like that IQ and that potential. So like I think after drinking and like not drinking anymore, a new life or a new realization about myself came that like, you know, you definitely excelled while you were drinking, but you didn't really tap into who you could be.
Yes, yeah.
And that's what like motivates me, because I definitely think that like I have stories that are worth telling to help other people. So I want to be able to do that in the best way possible within my means.
Yeah, dude, I think your story is so fascinating to me for so many reasons, but I think, one, you touched up on a lot of it in there, where what I'm looking at when I hear, or what I'm hearing when you're saying all this stuff, is that you're someone, you focus heavily on the individual. Like you're highly focused on, you know, what each one of us can do to better our lives, you know, like taking these steps, you know, like despite all odds, despite your trauma, your background, etc., rise to the occasion, like do your best. But at the same time, you're also very candid and open about the sort of, like, for lack of a better term, like identity politics. Like you're very candid about your experience growing up in the Black community, and then subsequently growing up in a white sort of music scene. Then how you sort of fit into that. So I think it's really interesting to hear how you sort of balance the two of them, because I feel like for someone like me, for a guy who grew up in a predominantly white suburban area, the conversation around like individual versus group in this sort of either or way, where it's like very binary, and people are either like nowadays it feels like the conversation nationally on race and really everything, not just race, but it's gender, race, you know, immigration, etc. It's very yes or no. It's very, you know, like this, we either need to completely focus on individual lives and, you know, no government, like no intervention, don't focus on your identity as like as a Black person or as a male or a female or an immigrant, etc. Just focus on yourself as an individual. You're either on that sort of end of the spectrum, or you're on the other end of the spectrum where it's like, don't focus on the individual at all. We can't talk to people as individuals. It has to be focused on group identity. You know, like it's all about like these different minority group communities and like and the unluck of the draw that they've gotten from like our country and our past and all that. True. So I think you're a fascinating case because you sort of fall in between those two groups in a way, because you spend all this time sharing your story and sharing how, you know, like hopefully inspiring others to pick themselves up from their circumstances, whatever those may be. But then you're also very honest about your experience and how it's had this crazy effect on you, like with your mom and your dad, and growing up with your grandparents, and then growing up in the Philly community, having these police encounters and all that. So do you want to kind of, as a overarching, sort of question and all this, like, do you want to just lightly sort of jump into the topic of your experience in race in America right now, and sort of what your perspective is on the national conversation at large, like how it's going and all that?
I think it's great that the conversation's happening, but this is my big but. I think it's almost like, I don't like the way it's being articulated in such a way as like it's just happening now.
Yeah, right.
It's been happening for years. Like, for example, when I was 10 years old, I saw like a car blow up and the cops didn't do anything about it till like an hour and a half later.
What?
Now, keep in mind, I didn't grow up in a dangerous neighborhood. Like, I can't go and say like, yeah, Uptown, dude, like when it comes to like black people in the hood, Uptown basically means you're a black guy that had it done well, you know?
Yeah.
And that happened, When I was 7 or 8 years old, I saw like people get shot, I've just seen so many different things that today would be hashtag and trended as if like this is something new.
Right.
So I think it's beautiful that people are talking and people are aware, but like this is my like major talking. Like when it comes to like change, first you're aware, then you understand, then you take action, and then you move forward. That's like that's an awareness change curve model.
Yeah.
And I think that we're finally starting to arrive on awareness, but I'm not so sure if we're really understanding.
Yeah.
When it comes to like Black Lives Matter, so many people say, I'm sorry. And it's just like, when it comes to like that dichotomy that you just described, I really am to the belief of it depends on the situation at hand and what happened. And there's not much of a social cognitive analysis. I just kind of made that up, social cognitive analysis of like what to do when certain events happen, which is understandable why people don't understand, because some people aren't trained. Some people don't have the foresight to like actually do anything. But I think the problem with the way that we're talking about a lot of things is we end up sharing a lot of information that isn't entirely accurate or isn't entirely applicable to what the positive or right thing to do about the situation.
Right.
Like, for example, and we're just going to bring this in organically. 2 weeks ago, the NFL said that football players can't speak up against, like, the national anthem. And people went in uproar about that. Mm-hmm. Then the same people that said the NFL players can't speak up about, the national anthem were the ones defending Roseanne a week later.
Right.
And that's the dichotomy that we really have to start to stop and think about is like, maybe dichotomies aren't really good for the human effect, or maybe they're not really good for decision making.
Yeah.
Because then certain conflicts occur that then reinforce bigotry.
Right. Well, it feels like one of the buzzwords that has been just going all over the place the past few years is this word tribalism, which we all sort of grew up with an innate understanding of. We all understand what tribes are and like what tribal communities have done over thousands of years, and even still some currently. So we sort of get that just means it's a binary mindset where it's like there's an in-group and there's an out-group, and then that there's two competing forces at bay. And I think a lot of what you're saying, from my perspective, like how I perceive this, especially on social media, it comes down to it comes down to this fact that there's people who want to, like you had said, it is a dichotomy. There's people who want to just focus on like individuality, and there's people who just want to focus on groups. And I think a lot of the issue, it boils down to a bunch of stuff, but one of the big ones is that you had mentioned, excuse me, how this has been going on forever, but it seems like just now we're having the conversation about it. And it seems like social media has been the apparatus that we're having this conversation on, which is a platform that none of us understand fully yet. It's like the Wild West. Like we're still trying to get a not just a feel for it, but we're trying to understand the implications of how we communicate through it, you know, because people, again, another buzzword, keyboard warrior. People who are on social media having all these discussions, a lot of those people are unable to have those discussions in person for either one, their personality type won't allow for it.
True.
Like they're not an argumentative or a confrontational person, so they don't want to have those types of talks, and they're just trying to spew out hate or bigotry or whatever it is. Or two, they might not have access. A lot of
True.
people, they're in these rural, suburban areas who are so separated from, I guess, the groundswell of a lot of these events and these rallies and these sort of highlighted moments for the past few years, like since Black Lives Matter came onto the scene. And I think that's a huge, huge, huge disconnect for people, because in how they interact with others online, social media is sort of like, it's almost like the city of the internet, because you see, like, there's major cities like LA, New York City, Philly, et cetera, where large swaths of people come into these cities, and the cities become the most diverse places in any place on the map. So, if you look at America as a continent, the places with the most diversity, and I don't just mean skin color, like all diversity, like gender, people from different countries, people speaking different languages, different occupations, et cetera.
Abilities, et cetera.
Everything. Yeah. It's all segmented into these cities. So a lot of the people who are on social media aren't in those cities. So they're removed from these conversations, and they don't have a mental framework, I think, on how to you talked about moving forward. Like, how do you starts with awareness, and then you move all the way through until you take action and you figure out how to solve the problem. A lot of these people, they don't even know how to get past the awareness stage.
And
that's
what I mean? Also what I meant by it gives room to superlatives to continue to exist. Like, I literally block someone off the internet because every time we have an argument about identity politics, they just argue with me in hashtags, and literally I don't understand what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I started to realize that because this person comes from privilege, I don't know what their motive is, because I can't really force that. And I do know them in person, but whenever I try to talk to them about it in person, they're just like, let's just have fun.
Yeah, let's not talk about any of that.
Yeah,
right?
I was just like, wow, you're totally running away, because you can't go and say your discussion's sounding a lot like All Lives Matter or Black Lives Matter or not all men or not all women, because the reality is if you were to dismiss someone's opinion by a hashtag, you're also dismissing their motives, which is the same way that non-marginalized people treat marginalized people.
Right.
And I'm not saying that all social justice warriors are bigots and they're so left or right. That's not my argument. Sometimes it is my argument, depending on the situation. But getting back to Black Lives Matter, let's step back and look at that.
Okay.
So, what people don't realize about Black Lives Matter is it was a movement founded by two or three women who were of queer identity, who wanted to even out the playing field of the injustices of black people. But people articulate Black Lives Matter as a movement that's about police brutality.
Right.
And I articulate what Black Lives Matter should be, even though that's not their mission, should be a continuation of what the SLC and the NAACP have been doing, and that's looking at the entire resources of what black people don't have. If you talk to me and sit to me today, I got a master's degree before I was 25. I could have gotten a PhD. If you look at the statistics of how many black men have master's degrees before the age of 25, it's not that high.
Right.
I've clearly risen above, I don't have any bullet holes in my chest, I don't have a kid, there's a high level of black men who have children out of wedlock and don't take care of their children. My cousin who's a rapper said N-words wouldn't be shit if it, can't say that.
No, you can say, you're fine.
If it wasn't for their grandma. Who raised me? My grandma. I could just keep on going. And those are the things that I think about when I think about Black Lives Matter. Why aren't black families nuclear? Why are black people not good to each other? Why are black men not good to black women? And why are black women also not good to black men?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of that, it's institutional. And I think a lot of, I don't want to say the movement got hijacked, because I don't know if that's the appropriate verbiage.
True.
But there's definitely, as these topics became hot in the media, people swelled into Black Lives Matter, and it became something that was hyper-focused on police brutality.
Yep.
And because of that, I've heard this argued all over the internet. Like, there's just this topic, because when it blew up, I was like, oh my god, this conversation, like, we need to have this conversation. I wanted to know more because I felt so ignorant by just all of it. You know what I mean?
One slice of the pie.
Yeah, it's that's what I was going to get at because the problem is that it is the most what do you want to call it? Like attractive slice of the pie in the sense that it gets the most media attention because it's so polarizing. Like when these videos started to come through online and started to go viral and people started to have these debates about the motives and police brutality and like was the police officer racist? Was he acting in good faith? And it literally, that moment when it started to go viral, you could watch the fabric in the America and in the way we converse about race and identity just start to split because people looked at these videos through the lenses of their upbringing, the area that they grew up in. Like if you grew up in rural America, the police officers are your best friends. You know what I mean? Like the police work with the communities. Like they know, everybody knows their names. Like they do a bunch of fundraising stuff. So again, because it's through social media, the lenses that people, and then obviously conversely the opposite, like if you grew up inner city and you're in a bad area, especially if you're in a bad area of town, but just inner city in general, like your relationship to the police and your understanding of like even if you haven't had that personal experience with a police officer, the broader context is you 100% know someone who has. You know what I mean? It's just known, like, okay, like so and so got in trouble with the law and like they were treated terribly or like they got profiled, etc. So those two polar opposite experiences came to light in social media, and it seemed like that was the only thing people were focusing on. And I think that really, and I don't want to a lot of those early really tragic shootings that happened, they were catalysts to launch this conversation. But it almost feels like the conversation should have gone from that to then institutional racism, because like how do we get to these underlying issues that do clearly exist? It's just that we don't, most especially white people, we don't have the framework to talk about them or understand them. But instead, it's what's clickbait
and what's confirming the biases, confirmatory biases.
It's like these videos are so easy to just like it's just clickbait. I mean, like if you're on the right or on the left, it almost didn't even matter what color your skin is, because you saw a lot of black Republicans coming out around that time being like, yeah, like the police officer was in their right to take whatever action. Like it became like this super polarizing thing where it was just left versus right in how you perceive the video and the subsequent actions afterward. You know what I mean?
Even a more broad subject is gun violence in general.
Exactly.
Like
and it's
there's
snowballed
more
into
biases
that.
because like everyone's now saying that like, all these gun violence instances are occurring because, there's the incel movement. It's totally happening. Yeah. But what people aren't realizing is every one of these massive gun shooting incidences do have an individual and unique story.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to think there's like some conspiracy anonymous group.
I know. You want to just throw a label on it.
Yeah, and throw a label on it.
And just to give context for people listening, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like incel, it means involuntary celibacy. Yeah. So it's good.
But that's real. We should totally acknowledge that and take action on it. Yeah. And it's really scary. But we also have to realize that like that's not all of gun violence.
Right.
Like, did anyone hear about like the black woman that shot up at McDonald's because the pickle wasn't good?
I didn't.
Yeah, that happened a few weeks ago, but no one talked about it.
Yeah. Because there's no narrative attached to that.
Yeah, or the woman who attacked another woman to defend her kids. I might have that story a little wrong. But the reality that I'm trying to say is, like, I grew up in a good neighborhood, but I also grew up seeing a lot of different violent incidences or just really terrible things. Like, I one time saw a dude jump out of a window in Chestnut Hill.
Wow.
I thought it was cool because, like, I was 7 years old and didn't understand what happened until I saw him get picked up by an ambulance.
Right, and then you understood, like,
and then I was like, wait, something's wrong. And it's just like, I think when it comes to America, this might sound very nerdy of me. I think we can do better in the sense that, like, we can look at different situations as separate as opposed to attributing them to biases, because this oppressor that we say, and I say that generally because every oppressor is different depending on the situation, is if we start seeing them as individual instances instead of, like, looking at the past situations, then maybe we could start to take action a little better.
Yeah.
Because some gun violences are a result of different systematic institutions that people didn't get. Like, what's that movie with Denzel Washington where he wanted to shoot up the hospital.
Oh, God. I don't know.
But that was a motivation because he couldn't get his son health care. That's what the movie was about.
Right.
And sometimes people might want to shoot someone because they can't get a resource that they should have.
Yeah.
Sometimes people want to shoot someone because they do legitimately have some toxic masculine problems and issues
just some
with entitlement.
Deep hate.
Yeah, some deep hate. Another person might shoot someone because they're scared and they have a lot of anxiety. So, those are all three separate situations that still lead to the loss of someone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people thought that way, we might do a little better at treating each other better.
Yeah, I think this is a whole nother point of the national conversation where it sort of becomes this paradox between people. There's people on the right who just solely want to focus on mental health, and they say it's all mental health. It's not about guns. It's not about race. It's not about or profiling, whatever. It's all mental health. Then you have people on the left saying, no, that's not the case. It's not mental health. This is about the guns. This is about racism in America. And these two sides, because of those biases, they refuse to dig in, not just to individual cases, which is super important, like you said, because each case is different, and we want to categorize them all together because that's just our nature. But not just them, but just also the deeper context to each one of these issues that we're talking about. Because I always think about it in terms of how far back can we go to sort of figure out where these patterns start to emerge. So racism, obviously, we can go back. I mean, you can go back even further, I guess. But for our context right now, you can go back to racism or slavery in America. So we have slavery, and then over the course of about a couple hundred years, we go to Jim Crow, and then we go to segregation laws and all that. And it's to the point where people have this notion in their head, they think about the history books they've read through, and they think, okay, race or slavery ended this year, segregation ended this year, civil rights started this year, and now we're here this year. So people and Obama became president. There's all these weird these crucial moments in history where people tend to look at and say, okay, so we're past all this, right? But I think there's this overarching refusal and on both sides of the political spectrum to go back and sort of just uncover, okay, where did a lot of these systematic issues come into play? What were some of these laws that were passed, and what were some of the reparations that did or didn't occur? In talking about Black America, it's how were these people, when they were set free, quote unquote, as slaves and put into American society, what were the reparations that were made? How can we go back? And then also each it's almost decade by decade, there's a different story almost, where you go through you can go through the crack epidemic in the 90s. It's there's all these different events that sort of snowballed all the way up to 2000, now where we're at in 2018 now, where we're starting to kind of go back through the history and see, okay, a lot of these issues of institutionalized racism, they're built into the infrastructure of our cities.
True.
And I think that's such a huge issue for people, because they want to look at it I don't know, it's just this black and white, that was then, this is now, or, this is right, that's wrong. And it doesn't tackle the nuances, and it only perpetuates this really, it's such a polarizing topic.
That's very
even
true.
as us having this conversation is so polarizing. I'm sitting over here well knowing that there's people who could be listening to this just right now, sort of punching their wall. It's this white dude, what's he talking about? Blah, blah. There's,
people can literally look at this conversation and people be like, wow,
it's so
Brian
hot.
took a hard one. Not realizing that if anyone saw our body language,
right? Yeah.
I'm enjoying the crap out of this conversation. This is a Sunday fun day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But it's so toxic. It's the conversation, and I really do blame social media for most of this.
True.
It's so. When you get in person with people, I mean, it's a stereotype to say, when a lot of it's a stereotype, but it's also true. There's been, I forget the guy's name. He was a black, I think he was a musician, actually. Do you know who I'm talking about? He was a guy who befriended 200 people from the KKK or something like that, and then got them to leave the KKK. You know what I'm talking about?
He is the real life Clayton Bigsby.
Yeah, I
know
forget
who you're
his
talking
name.
about. I can't think of his name either.
But that's obviously a one. I'm not trying to equate that instance to everything that we're talking about. I'm trying to say that is an instance, an example to look toward and say, that's an in-person change that occurred through real relationship, whereas most of the change people are looking to implement now is through social media, which is just so static and there's no feeling to it. There's no faces and body language.
Yeah, think about modernized activism. Like, I've talked to a lot of, like I said, I was raised by my grandparents, and my grandmother's still very much in my life, and so are like my older cousins and things like that. And I said, when people were activists back in the day, were people self-righteous about it? And they said, what do you mean by that? And I was like, well, when I'm on social media or like when I see people saying that they want to do something, they like to throw around the term organizer. I'm an organizer, so therefore these things I'm void of, and or because I organized this, that, and the third. And they said no. And then I said, well, what about solidarity? And they said, well, solidarity existed in a way that because everything was so physical and everything was in person, you saw the things that happened and there wasn't an interpretation via a platform. Talk about any situation, like my stories about how I've been chased by cops, or my stories about how, I've dated women and then they said, I can't date you because my father hates black men. Like, those sort of stories weren't something I'd share on the internet. Instead, someone saw that happen, and then another person saw it happen, and then the solidarity was a lot more personal, and people organized together and collectively as a result of that.
Right.
Now it's about who can make the most attractive digital content, and then we start to think about our own stories, and then from there people develop solidarity, which is like beautiful, but then can become somewhat of a crapshoot, because the third variable that occurs is, what's the best way, and this is kind of like a product of an individualistic society in America, what's the best way that I could tell my story and then hope that people also listen? Which, I mean, in the same right, someone could say that about me, and just like hope that attention is desired, because that's where like statements that are very common to today, you deserve the love, everyone deserves attention, everyone deserves validation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's very hard, because then you dismiss the biggest point. Is it about your ego and you're starving for validation and attention and the confirmation of your biases? Or is it really about the fact that you experienced something, and this is what I'm about. I experienced something that wasn't right, and that is a lot of things, racism, being excluded from communities and things like that. And I don't want that to happen to someone else, so I'm going to share my story so then this doesn't keep happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this sort of, it's like a door opened up, and there's now people like you who are authentically trying to utilize these platforms to share that story, to create this virtual solidarity and honestly reach more people.
True.
And it's that aspect of it's amazing, but then there's this other that through that same door, people now creep through, and they're using this platform for attention seeking and validation, and it muddies the waters so hard too.
100%.
Because people go onto social media and they share these stories, and then you have other people who are either there or know them coming on social media saying stuff like, oh, I was there, they're lying about that, and it becomes this whole like, who do I believe, whose side am I on? And it becomes almost like you have to, I don't want to say you have to choose sides of the victim, but it feels that way, because like it's natural, like you were saying, like that story you shared, like with the whole A Day Without Love origin story. You saw that girl getting beat by her boyfriend. Each one of us on some level has experienced that's a crazy degree. Like I've never seen something that bad.
And I've had other college experiences where I've seen stuff like that happen.
Yeah.
Like, for example, my college neighbor got ran over by a car by her ex, and like I saw the aftermath. I didn't see the car happen, but like I came out because I was going to her apartment anyways.
Wow.
And she's like laying down, like literally a wheel on her arm, and I'm like, what the, like, and I was just like, Chrissy, we got to get you to the hospital. And then like we took her to the hospital, and then she's like, I still want to see him, and I'm like, no, you can't. And then we convinced her to get a restraining order. She was able to move from there, finish school at a satellite campus, and she's safe. She's actually about to get married, but that's the sort of things I saw in college, you know what I mean?
Right.
But instead, the process is, let me go take a picture, let me put it on the internet, let's see how many likes it gets, maybe it'll get on Huffington Post.
Right.
And it's almost like, that's great that you do that, but then what about the victim?
Yeah.
Have they recovered? Did they even want that to be on the internet?
Yeah.
Did you ask them?
Like, was there consent?
Was there consent? Like, these are the things that I sometimes think about when it comes to just, like, identity politics as a whole, regardless of, like, what angle you want to look at. Mm-hmm. Because we can't be so fast to share things. Like, sometimes we have to be faster to act on things.
Yeah.
And just cap it at there.
Right. 'Cause, I mean, those experiences that's kind of what I was, I guess, trying to get at, is that those experiences that you had where, and I think that each of us have had to some degree, is that when we see a victim in real life, when we or you know, through a friend or whatever it is, you hear about it, or you come across a situation where there's a clear person under some type of oppression, violence, etc. You look at that and you say, that's wrong. Clearly, I'm going to step in and do whatever I can, whether I have to call the police, fight somebody, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Depending on the situation.
True.
You have that if you're a decent person, you have that innate response to do good. But then, whereas on social media, the response to do good is muddied because there's so much context that we're missing, so that when you do hyper focus on a lot of these instances, you get this left-right dichotomy where people, they don't. It's almost like a knee jerk because media is so skewed nowadays.
True.
You know, media is so biased, and people have this, you know, oh, well, it was on CNN. It must be like these like liberal agenda, or MSNBC, like liberal agenda. It was on Fox News. It must be like Republicans like spewing up hate or whatever it is. And it's like this back and forth that people have, and it makes it really, really, really hard on an individual level when you see this stuff on social media to know, am I doing the right thing, or am I perpetuating like a stereotype, or am I siding with a victim in this case who's actually a liar? Because now we know that that's pretty common. Like, it's something that we don't want to acknowledge, because it's like I said, it's this innate part of each of us where we each want to side with a victim, and we each want to do right by people who are under oppression of any sorts. But when it becomes this whole, like you said, ego fulfillment, you know, like virtue signaling, where people are putting content out there, it's so difficult to sniff out, you know, if it's authentic. Whereas, to your point, if it's in real life and you see this stuff happening to you, or it's your friend who it happened to, and you can share these stories, it's like, why, in that context, why would there be lying involved? Like, people can see things differently, but there's no lying. It's not like you're not going to lie to your friend who, like, something traumatic just happened to you. Like, it's just, and if you are, I mean, I guess you could if you're a sociopath, but like,
100%.
But like, if you're, I guess all this kind of revolves around, like, if you're a decent, honest person, like, you're not going to outwardly, intentionally lie about something that happened to you. You're going to share your story, which is what you're kind of getting at with, like, the importance of being vulnerable and, like, trying to set not just an example, but to open up a dialogue for people in these awful situations that are going on. And, like, I personally feel like it is just, it's gotten so bad on social media.
It's gotten very bad.
Like, you'd think it would have gotten better. Like, it's just gotten bad since all this stuff has really started to take off.
Yep. And like, as weird as it sounds, I don't think memes are making it better.
Yeah.
Because so many people are like obsessed with memes, almost to the point where like you could say hello and they'll respond with a meme.
Yeah.
And like, memes are just nothing but glorified political cartoons. Let's be honest here.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people aren't picking up on, just because we're like sticking with the topic of race, aren't picking up on that some of the most viral memes have been low-key racist.
Yeah.
Dat Boy, racist. You know, Ugandan Knuckles, racist.
Yep.
You know, those are just two of the most recent ones. They have some very racist undertones, and people just like wonder, they're like, oh, it's just a meme, and it's like that you sound like just like someone from 1920 or like, oh, it's just blackface.
Right.
And that's bad.
Yeah.
You know, or the term POC, like, you know, that definitely has like some contextual and off color, on color, like connotations. But like when you start using POC like so frequently that you can't just say black person or Asian person or Latinx person,
right?
Then you're no different than the person from 1930 saying no colored people allowed or only
you're
colored
grouping,
people allowed.
It's just like a large overarching group. Like we were just talking
like, I literally
about.
talk about that on my album, and like, you know, I think a lot of people using memes, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's internet culture. I think that's a huge, I work in social media, so like so much of my job, I'm deep in this culture where it goes all the way down to 4chan, and then you got Reddit, and you have these like sub-online communities, and then Twitter's a huge one. Like Twitter, like they sort of all filter into Twitter and YouTube, into like the comment sections and all that, and it's really just, it's a bizarre world because it feels like, on one hand, I look at the people who like sort of partake in this online culture, and they're some of the most informed people out there because those are the platforms, especially like Twitter and YouTube and Reddit, but mostly like Twitter and YouTube, I would say. They have like there's so many like people like you or I, individuals can create a channel on those social media platforms, and honestly, like if you're putting out decent content and you have any sort of like a starting point, like a story to what it is you're saying, like you create a following fairly easily. Like if you follow a certain rhetoric, you know, like there's a lot of just really strong that's where pretty much the alt-right like got its like growth from was YouTube, because like there's all these YouTube channels where it's people who they didn't start out as alt-right, like they started out, you know, as part of like some other political affiliation or social group, and then they sort of fill it into this narrative via just like, you know, like stuff in the news and like their little 2 cents that they can kind of start slowly sneaking it in to the to what the content they're putting out. But it's like really, really weird because that's on one hand people are super informed on it, but on the other hand it's like what goes on in the deepest, darkest corners of the internet, it really is the most racist, bigoted places in the world, because it's people, again, it's through the lens of social media where it's people who don't really have relationships with people in real life in most cases. Like people who are spending all day on 4chan or Reddit or YouTube, most of them don't have many friends in real life. Like, let's just be honest. Like, I think that is a fair, like, I'm all about breaking stereotypes, but I think that's a fair stereotype.
100%.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean they don't have friends.
Yeah,
it just means, like, as a general rule, they are going to this community because whether maybe they live in the middle of nowhere, maybe they just are socially awkward.
Or they ran out of places or people to go to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just like a crappy person. Exactly. And they were you know, forced into this hole of the internet to go, like, this is where they have to make their friends. But yeah, because of that, it's just void of this like in-person, human, face-to-face, heart-to-heart relationship, and the stuff that they feel they can talk about. It verges on all, like, it teeters on all these things we're talking about. Teeters on like really anti-woman, anti-black, like like name it. Like they teeter on these things because they feel like it's almost like this edgy, like they get off on it. Like it's this edgy place where they can relate and they can say whatever they want, and it's, you know what I mean?
And I think it's like a very toxic coping mechanism because, you know, I think everyone's been anti something to a level of degree.
Of course,
because that's what I meant by depends. That's been a lot of my argument. I'm not saying I'm a centrist because I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
I think my dialogue kind of shows that.
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of like, all right, let's go with the anti-woman example. I guarantee you with all of these men or even women, because there's women that are anti-women, these people that are anti-women, one incident occurred and they didn't think about the other 4 billion women out there.
Right, they got rejected.
Yeah, they might have gotten rejected. Clown cake went on their face. I'm being funny. Regardless of what happened. And that's like honestly a victim of trauma. And, you know, we sympathize with victims of some kinds of trauma versus victims of other kinds of trauma.
Right.
And I'm not saying like give them sympathy, but maybe kill them with kindness.
Right.
You know, try to change their heart enough so that they realize I don't have to be this bad. I don't have to hold on, because the reality is I need to forgive myself and start to realize like I can change. I can start having better relationships with women.
Yeah, well, that is the line.
Mom's the OG woman relationship.
Right,
you know?
right, yeah.
Because you ever hear this statement? If you ever see a man that treats a woman bad, look at his relationship with his mother.
Of course.
That's a lot of what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just like, it's not like the surface level, like, oh, me and mom are fighting. It's like hatred. Like there's like a deep, there's a deep disconnect or rejection or whatever it is, like mom leaving or mom not paying attention, whatever it is. And it's, dude, this line is one of the scariest ones to walk for me, because it is so, you teeter. Like with what you're saying, to have empathy for these people, like you teeter when you play that game, you teeter on the edge of enabling.
Yeah, and I'm not saying
no,
ableism.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I'm saying like that's how it's perceived. Again, imagine this sort of like small segment of our conversation posted on social media as a status. We would just get crucified because out of context, a lot of like what we're talking about here, it's scary for people to understand, because I think you're totally right to the degree that a lot, not all, a lot of the people who fall into this anti-woman specifically category, they are people who have experienced rejection, hatred, isolation. They're not socially adjusted, etc. And that is a serious thing.
Like
whereas,
I wrote. Okay, wait.
No, I was finished. You can jump in right here, but I was just going to, as a culture, we've sort of looked at that and we make fun of it, and we further isolate them.
True.
We further perpetuate their hate in all these instances, and it's a scary place to be because you don't want to enable them. You don't want to say, hey, what you're doing is cool, I love you. But you want to be able to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, but here's a broadened perspective. Like what I don't know what the answer is. I don't think neither of us do.
True.
But there has to be some third way where we can show these people affection and get them adjusted into society in a way where it can just diminish a lot of this hatred that they have.
True.
You know?
Like, for example, first grade, girls said I had the Brian Walker touch. That lasted from first grade to like fifth grade. And it was honestly a tool to bully me so I could be excluded. And that could have honestly been the birth of something much worse for me, you know? And I did get other bullies. And then, I mean, I got bullied in many other different ways. And then at 16, I wrote a book called The Hurt, the Horny, the High School Nerd. And what the book was pretty much about is the fact that nerds should be accepted. And I wrote it from every single angle, from sex to like what I've gone through to like what goes on in your head. And then I concluded the book talking about the fact that no one should be entitled. The reality is everyone should really respect each other and treat each other with kindness and things like that.
Yeah.
And some people have misread it and saw it as like, oh, you're crazy, da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But the reason why I wrote the book was, and the reason why I even still do music is because I've experienced rejection from every angle.
Yeah.
And I realized that rejection is a part of acceptance. You know, not everyone gets in the UPenn. Not everyone gets that job that they want. But how you bounce back and how you start to reevaluate yourself is the important thing. And I think a lot of angry people don't get to reevaluate themselves, either because the rate of rejection happens so frequently, they don't even know how to breathe up again. So then they give in to hate, and then other destructive things happen.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the internet does enable that hate on both ends of the spectrum, from being judged to finding a community that's also judged the same way. And I guess the big point that I'm trying to say is, if I think about the things that I've been through, from being bullied to getting jumped to being rejected by women to white people calling me the N-word, et cetera, I could have been one of those people we're talking about.
Yeah.
But the big reason why I didn't choose that is because I'll definitely give it to my grandma and my grandpa. I knew that there was love out there. I still had enough light in my life to make that light bigger, you know?
That's beautiful.
And, like, that's kind of, like, where my heart goes through. Like, it's not so much of a... Yeah, let the guy shoot the whole school. That's not where my mind's going, you know. Yeah, let that guy abuse that woman.
Yeah.
That's not where I'm coming from. I'm coming from a perspective of, I've been through similar things that this guy's been through, but I chose the positive way out.
Right.
And he didn't know who to choose the positive way out. Like, I grew up in the church. I had mentors, you know.
Yeah.
I also did Taekwondo. I had positive teachers teach me positive things to get out my frustration. I lift weights and stretch and run to, like, let my, like, fears go out, you know. I try to help people and think outside my mind, but not that many people think that way.
Yeah, well, it's like that quote. It's the line of good and evil goes through the heart of every man or woman or whatever, where it's I think you're acknowledging right now that you could easily have gone in one of those directions. I still haven't had a serious
girlfriend.
Yeah.
I'm 29, but a lot of 29-year-old men would have either A, offed themselves if they went through that, or B, chose a direction that's just not positive, just completely toxic, you know.
Isolation,
hate. But at the end of the day, I'm out here going on stupid dates and and having experiences that, like, I'm not mad at myself for anymore.
Yeah, and you're not giving up on it, which is
because you can't.
Yeah, but I think that kind of ties back to what we were saying earlier in the conversation, how it really does feel that nowadays there is a lack of, whatever you want to call it, leaders. There's a lack of inspirational, motivational figures in our country, in our world, where people can sort of look to and get this, whatever you want to call it, this sort of drive within themselves to be better. Like, it really does feel like, I think a lot of people, I don't know what it is. It's like, it does kind of come down to tribalism, because a lot of people look to someone like Trump as this leader, like this figurehead that, like, is inspiring a nation. And then there's a lot of people, obviously, the other end of the spectrum, that look the same way at Obama. And, like, go down the line of presidents, go down the line of, like, we talked about Gary Vee and, like, these sort of, you know, like in motivational speaker types. It's like, people try to latch on to whoever fits their ideology and to whatever sort of feeds into their confirmation bias. And I think it's a huge blind spot for us because we just don't. It's really, really easy to just fall backwards when life hits you, you know? And I think that's like a really basic, elementary thing to think and say. Like it sounds like even saying it right now, I'm like, well, it's like so dumb to even have to say. But it's so true nowadays. And I can't tell how much of that is like cultural and how much of it is individual, but like it's obviously a mix to some degree, but it really does feel like culture, the way it's shifted, has now enabled young people specifically they don't have a strong sense of identity, you know. And I think a lot of things sort of fall in correlation with that along the way. Like we talked racism, that's like any form of bigotry is a huge proponent in that, and there's obviously like culture is shifting, like value systems are shifting. Like I don't go to church regularly or anything like that, but I know that like as a whole, like people in general in America are going to church less. So there's sort of like a value system change there where people growing up in the past, whether or not you agreed or they even agreed with the system, they had a church as like a community stabilizer where like everybody went to the same church. They all knew each other. Like we all sort of met here and gathered, etc. But now it seems like most people, they don't have like a central focus point. Like we have like podcasts, like people listen to their own podcasts and they follow people on YouTube and they have voices that inspire them, but there's not really many unifying people or that are able to sort of like wrap us all under an umbrella that we can all agree with and come together on and be inspired by. And I think because of that, if you are someone who is specifically, we were just talking about people online and like the incel type sort of movement, if you are one of these people who's experienced rejection and loneliness, depression, whatever it is, and you have this innate hatred toward women or just the other of some sort, I don't think they have the resources to get out. You know what I mean?
Cognitive resilience or emotional resilience.
Yeah, it's both.
To bounce back.
Totally,
like for example,
totally.
I got my master's degree 5 years ago, right? Exactly 5 years ago, like, because it's June 2018, I got it in 2013. And I can confidently say I've probably applied to 2,000 jobs and they've rejected me. So there's two ways I could think of this. 2,000 jobs rejected me, I must be hopeless. Or I could keep trying and find my niche and find where I belong and keep going there, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that doesn't just apply to jobs, it applies to so many things. Like, a lot of people say, Brian, how do you know so many people? And the reality is, I'm just good at failing. You know what I mean? Like, that's
just trying new things a lot.
I've tried a lot of new things. That's the real answer. It's not like, you know, I got good guy, popular guy smile going on in me where I'm like, be my friend. Yeah. That's not what it is. It's just that, like, I've been around the block because I've been trying to find out where I belong, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that might come from the fact that, like, my mother told me that, like, you know, you don't belong anywhere. That might have also come to the fact that, like, most of my peers were raised by, like, a nuclear family. I was with my grandparents, so everything was old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I was trying to, like, there's so many different ways and questions that I could ask and answer about why I've tried so hard at, like, exploring different options. But I definitely know and acknowledge that that's a rare trait about me because, like, I saw this tweet the other day. It's like, hey, who's trying to start a North Atlantic East Coast band where we record 2 EPs, do a mix with our best friends, and then give up? And I was just like triggered.
Everybody.
That's everybody, you know? And, like, meanwhile, like, I'm trying different things. And, like, maybe that's a personality trait of me, but, like, I just definitely think, like, whatever you're doing, whether it's dating, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's writing a book, whether it's losing weight, to have the foresight to just keep trying different new things to get to where you are, like, isn't a bad thing. I think trying is actually a part of living.
Yeah.
Because if you're not trying at something, what are you doing?
Yeah,
you know?
you touched on something in there, though, I think, to add in. Like, you talk about how failure is, like, you're willing to fail in a lot of these situations, which is a huge, huge portion of all that. But I think another huge portion for you personally, too, is, and I empathize with you heavily because I feel similarly wired, whereas you are someone who actively seeks out community. You know, you're someone who you've built community where you've gone, and like you said, there's in groups and there's out groups, and there's people who like you, there's people who don't like you, like, depending on what you do and what you say. But you're someone who really has tried to create that somewhere. Like,
Sure.
do you want to get into it all? Like, I don't know, to kind of like get us out of that long rant about all those social issues. We can kind of keep talking about them, but in the context of the Philadelphia DIY group that you founded, let's get into that. Like, explain what that is to people. Like, what got you into that? And...
So, it was the biggest mistake I've ever made. Like, actually started out in a positive way. Because I started this thing called The Quarterly, which was supposed to be like a nonprofit fundraiser entity. I guess that's what you call it, entity. Where on a seasonal basis, quarterly, I would promote a compilation disc. You were on one of them. If I'm
I
correct.
remember that.
Yeah, you were totally on one of them. And I would pick like 4 to 5 acts to play a concert, and it was a benefit concert. But it wasn't just a concert. We'd also get art vendors and small business vendors to be there. So to be like a bazaar, and all the money or like percentage of money from different parties would go towards Rock to the Future, because Rock to the Future is a nonprofit that teaches underserved children how to play music, which I think is like beautiful, especially for the city of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I made like a lot of connections, but I was like, well, how am I going to make these connections? I can't just do it like one show at a time, because like one person can only do so much. So I started the Philadelphia DIY Collaborative as a networking spectrum,
which is a Facebook group.
For people to talk about how we can make the community better, to collaborate, for small businesses, for artists, for vendors, for musicians to talk to. Little did I know, there's DIY groups of every city. That's what I did not know, because I wasn't touring when I started this. So, like, by the thousands, people are coming from all different angles, posting their shows. I'm like, this isn't what I want. So...
Now there's what, like 6,000 people in or something?
Dude, it's almost 8,000. It's like 50 from 8. Like, I mean,
insane.
My phone's on airplane mode right now, but we're very close to 8,000.
That's crazy.
So now, because like my day life, like my outside of music, is like I work in HR and I go like to a lot of tech and design meetups just for fun. I like started to use the concept of meetups, not using meetup.com, but using Facebook, because it's free on Facebook, to set up meetups on different topics to get people to talk in person, because there's a lot of conversations happening on those groups. But I thought, you know, if you get at least a sample of this 8,000 group of people to talk on behalf of their craft and their arts and their beliefs. And none of the topics are like controversial. They're very broad. And actually I just did like a little open discussion, because our last meetup didn't do so well, but every other meetup's been really well. Is like, I want to create a community around knowledge that allows people to share their craft and network with people, and to just like learn how to do stuff. So like our last meetup was on like jazz. Like literally no one from the group showed up. I mean, we had people that showed up, but I found out that hyper-specific genre meetups is probably not a good idea. But our meetup before that was on booking. So I got Carolyn from So Far Sounds.
Nice.
She
just did the podcast.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, we've known each other since college.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's very great. We had Kelsey from Live Nation, a.k.a. the Fillmore. We had Andrea from Union Transfer.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then we also had someone from Creep Records. All talk about booking in general. And I talked to all of them individually, and they said, we would like to do another one, but talk about from another factor of booking. So, like, I'm working with Andrea to do, like, tour routing, you know? So that's kind of, like, the sort of stuff we want to do. We also did a graphic design meetup. We had, like, about 25, 30 heads there, and that was in, like, a South Philly basement. So that's the other thing. I'm trying to make it knowledge that would be otherwise, like, $85 to $150, like, to go to the event for free.
Right.
So making it as DIY as possible. Rock to the Future's been kind enough to, like, let us use their space, like, out on evenings.
That's so cool.
So that's the sort of stuff. And I'm, like, asking a few questions to make it the most effective way possible. Like, do I need to do this once a month, every other month, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
But that's, like, the community stuff that I'm working on now, to, like, give back and help other people help each other.
Yeah, it's such a hard thing to manage an online community like that. Because, if you, like you said, you started it for reason A, and then it sort of became this other thing.
Yeah.
And now you have to sort of figure out, like, it's taken on a life of its own, but you want to keep it pure. Like, have you thought about, like, are you thinking about making another group and just kind of redesigning it, since this one's kind of gone a different direction, or do you want to keep it within and try to sort of reclaim the
I'm thinking about keeping it
of
within, because actually a few people talked to me about, like, they like the mission of the group, and I was thinking about, like, the show portion where there's, like, a wealth of just, like, touring bands. I need a show, or look at my show. I'm thinking about just trying to create like a shared document where people could just list their shows XPN style and not post in there. So like if you have a show, just look here.
Yeah, because the poster, like when you get like 50 people a day posting their show, it's just like, okay, like what is this actually doing?
Like why not just have one stop shop?
Yeah.
And then they say that.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about just like, because you could do a shared document on groups. So if people just post there. But my question about the governance is, one, are people going to be petty enough to delete other people's shows? And then two...
Man, the fact that you even have to think about that.
But people are that petty, you know?
That's so crazy.
And then two, who's going to be able to delete and upload the shows?
Who has
because
authority.
There's a lot of shows in Philadelphia and the surrounding area. And then the last thing is, who's going to start posting shows in places that aren't even relative to Philly? Like, someone posted, like, a festival in Harrisburg. I'm like,
that's not Philly.
You're only posting this because there's a lot of people in there, not because it's Philly, you know? Or people from South Jersey. Like, South Jersey musicians, and I'm totally going to get flack for this, they love to say that they're Philly, like they're part of the Philly music scene. And it's like, that only applies with Eagles football, and that's it. Like, you are a South Jersey music scene, that is it.
Yeah, it's its own scene in and of itself.
Yeah.
Right.
It totally is. I mean, like, almost 10 years ago, it was like a hardcore scene.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I grew up in. So.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's just like, just acknowledge that's where you're from, and that's okay.
Yeah, people love the labels, though. Like, it's way cooler to tell people that you're from Philly than from some random...
And they're like, well, we play there. I was like, well, guess what? I play in Chicago. I'm not in the Chicago music scene.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Geography's weird. It's really weird how we sort of attach, like, these... It's like, oh, but I have family there. I hang out there all the time. It's like, okay, if you're not from there, it's fine. It's fine.
Totally fine. Like, it's wild.
That's cool, man. It's really cool you started that group. Do you have, like, before... Like, I want to say, like, we kind of went through a lot, like, of topics throughout this whole thing. Like, I want to know, like, if you have any, like, sort of wrap-up thoughts on just how to instill community and, like, maybe how we can better a lot of these conversations through social media and then now, honestly, like, the national conversation at large. We've talked a little bit about race and sexism and the sort of dichotomy between right and left and all that. Like, is there sort of... Do you have any closing ideas that you want to put out there, like on like potential solutions or things that we could be doing better?
I think the most important thing is we should start asking more questions instead of pointing fingers. Because like literally yesterday I was in a conversation about gentrification and urban development with some friends. And I thought this guy was trying to say that Chinatown doesn't deserve to exist in Philadelphia. And I was like, whoa.
What?
You are flirting with some very controversial territory because I love a lot of food in Chinatown. So I was like...
For that reason.
Yeah. So instead of flipping out at him, I wanted to know where he was going with this. And he was saying that, well, like, you know, I think Chinatown exists still in Philly because of the tourist aspects that it gives to Philadelphia as a whole. And I was like, all right, that's fair. Think about the Chinese night lantern like festival. Have you ever been to it?
I haven't been to the one in Philly.
Literally, if you just look up Chinese lantern festival,
it's like lanterns everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's really beautiful. And I was like, that's very correct. It does bring a lot of revenue. And he's like, also, you have the convention center. And I was like, all right, these are valid points. But his other point was he thinks that Chinese immigration is going to be on the decline in the next 50 years because Chinese finances and government are doing well. I was
going to say their economy is booming.
Yeah, I was like, that's an interesting theory, but I can't say yes or no to that.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what he said. But the reason why I'm saying asking questions and using myself as an example is I easily could have just gone on a complete rant about it, internet style. Yeah. You don't respect Chinese lives, you're racist, then the third.
Yep.
But I was just like, okay, I get it. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing to do is like really ask questions because we're so quick to call someone something ism or is ist, like ableist, racist, da. And like if there's no dialogue, literal dialogue, meaning like question and answers, where did you get this information? Don't use memes or links in conversations if you're going to use. Like speak.
Yeah.
Because the reality is this entire conversation that we've had, where did we send a meme to each other?
Yeah, right.
It's not physically possible.
Where did we pull up a link?
We didn't pull up any link. And that's the problem that a lot of people have in conversations. And like for me, I don't engage with that anymore because I realized like once it got to that, the validity of the conversation went out of the window.
Dude, I'm so with you. I totally agree. And I have felt the same thing recently online, specifically what you just mentioned about how, like, when a conversation devolves into memes and links, it's really odd how that is such a trigger mechanism for people, because when you send someone a link and say, well, look into it, like, you're wrong, like, I'm right, like, here's why I'm right, they can easily just pull up another link. Like, it's so easy. You just get in the link battle then, because everybody's got their own sources. And I am not equating tit for tat. Like, it's not like there's equal links across the board. Obviously, some people put up terrible links to terrible websites that
Wikipedia.
like Wikipedia, or just some like awful like fringe website, like a blog site or whatever. But like, it's still, the point still stands that when you devolve into that, then it's no longer a conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not about ideas. Then it's about proving someone wrong.
True.
You know.
And I've definitely been like told things that are just so far from being right. I can only laugh, especially on a digital world. So, like, that's my advice on, like, what not to do. What I think people should do in terms of building community, building a brand, building who they are is be patient enough to know that none of this happens overnight, you know. I've only been doing A Day Without Love properly for 5 years, and some people think I've been here forever, but it's like, if you look at all the heroes you've known, didn't take them 5 years.
Decades.
Like, the internet definitely does make things look bigger than what it is. And not, like, there's artists that, like, did get found out, like, a few months ago, but they don't realize, like, they're only 17.
Right. There's some immediate success stories, but those are the exception, not the rule.
And a lot of times they're not there for that long. Like, what happened to Soulja Boy? No one knows. Yeah. What about Young Jeezy? No one knows. Like, we keep going, you know? Yeah. Like, is Matt Ox, the fidget spinner rapper, going to be great 5 years from now? I don't know. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's long game.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So before we close out, like, I know you had just released Diary in the past couple of months. So do you want to tell people a little bit about that, where they can find it, etc.?
So you can find it on all digital platforms. I have a few physical copies. I printed like 100. There's like 60 left.
Nice. That's great, man.
Yeah, I'm going on tour with Marceline, who's a new artist. She just released a record this Friday called Indignities and Depravities. But Diary is a lot different than Solace in the sense that it's the most political thing that I've done, because I wanted to put myself on a songwriting challenge where I wanted to write about love, friendships, faith, politics, and under politics it's like healthcare, racism, et cetera, and faith. Because I do have a faith with God. I do go to church, not as much as I should, but I do go to church. Like, I pray and things like that. And what I wanted to do is I wrote 5 songs on each topic. I'm not writing more than 5 songs on each topic. And I intentionally made it a streaming of consciousness where I put myself under a set of rules, like, don't rewrite your lyrics because this is a diary. No one rewrites their diary. Right. Don't use a click track because a diary is just straight. And 3, do it in your bedroom because most people write diaries in their bedroom. So I love that. Yeah, so it's a lo-fi bedroom record, and I pretty much just tracked everything, mixed it myself. Also said, like, I'm definitely risking this because I'm not an engineer. I should mix it myself. I should also master it myself because it's a diary. So I wrote a 24-song album that's 64 minutes long. 64 minutes is pretty average album length because albums are between 35 to 60 minutes. And I just pretty much wrote it in my bedroom and, like, did track to track to track. And it's been a lot of positive feedback because, like, I use samples in there. Like, the last track ends on a door closing. It's on the song God Gave Me a Chance, and that door closing was the time that I was in Iowa on tour. So I'm pretty proud of it. I also wrote it because I realized in Solace I talked about how I found comfort within myself, but Diary is about the things I struggled to find that comfort.
I love that, man. Yeah. Awesome, cool. So I'll have links and everything where they can find you and whatnot. Do you got anything you're doing right now, or anything that you want people to check out before we peace out?
So I have a bunch of YouTube sessions that you could check out just by Googling YouTube. Well, not YouTube.
Googling YouTube, which I still totally do sometimes.
I totally meant to say YouTubing A Day Without Love. So I'm vlogging the diary session, so you can check that out. Subscribe to my YouTube. I have a basement session from Brooklyn coming out. I just did a session with another YouTube vlog called The Basement. So that's
Nice.
funny. I did a YouTube session with nosebleed sessions in a basement, and then I did a basement session in a basement.
Just type in basement on YouTube.
Yeah, literally.
Day Without Love.
And then I'm also starting, it's not an LP, but a series of records. I don't know what to call it. Let's just call it Good Friends compilations, where I'm doing 3 to 4 song EPs with different songwriters or different vibes. I've tracked 2 songs so far. One's in demo quality. The other one's like done. It just needs cello. Where I'm trying to explore folk and hip hop and also EDM and writing songs around those genres.
Cool.
And they're like multi-genre EPs. And they don't have like a theme like the past 2 records. So.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, dude, this has been a wonderful conversation.
It has.
I'm really glad that you got to come out here into the basement, into
This
the
was great.
dungeon,
To the dungeon.
to talk.
A third basement experience.
Hell yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming out.
Oh,
and
anytime.
peace out, everybody.
For sure. Ciao, ciao.